Welcome to People's Republic with Brianna Griffith. We bring you news and analysis from the front lines of the global struggle for social and economic justice. I'm your host, Brianna Griffith, and here's what's going down in your backyard and across the world. Welcome to People's Republic. My name is Brianna Griffith. This week we are going to continue talking about kind of LGBTQ issues, especially as they center around AISD, the recent Celebration Church protest, and the often contentious AISD school board meeting. So to talk about all this and more, we are joined by Naomi Wilson, who's an activist, LGBT activist with several different groups, including the Antifa Church, Tent, and Austin DSA, that's Democratic Socialists of America. Thank you, Naomi, for coming on.
Hi.
You made the news recently, and we just had Ken Zarefis on this past episode to talk about kind of this as well. I know there's been a lot of struggles around kind of Austin, the Austin school board, and different what I would consider to be right wing concern trolls around kind of the Austin ISD sex ed curriculum, as well as just general issues of AISD. Renting out for a very long time their school property to an extremely transphobic, homophobic, bigoted church, the Celebration Church. I'm wondering if you can just kind of, place us in kind of the framework of so what sort of are the issues that you've been trying to tackle with AISD on this one?
Yeah, so originally it started off with our Celebration Church protests. I didn't go to the very first one. I kind of tagged along later because I was like, it's very nervous to put yourself in that position, especially as a trans person of color. It's already I live every day in my life kind of in fear of these people. So having to go to an event where they're kind of coagulating and spooky, but coagulating and that's where their community is harbored. It's intense. And so I ended up going a couple months after a lot of my friends had just been going to it. We protested for about a year, and officially they finally left a couple months ago. After they had left, we still had a lot of issues that the school board needed to address, like what they were doing with the money, because they had said they were going to redistribute the money that they received and kind of put it back into aiding a community that has been harmed by these people for so long. And so they didn't really provide any receipts. So that's why I was going to the school board meeting, was to kind of demand receipts. What are you guys doing? What are you guys planning? You just relocated $35,000, but your Pride, the official Austin Pride float was just a school bus. So we're what is don't you guys get those for free?
$30,000 to rent one of their own school buses.
One of their own school buses. So that's why I was going to the school meeting, because we were frustrated, what's going on. And so while I was there, I don't even going to the meetings, I started knowing that the school board was updating the sex ed curriculum. And of course, that's really personal to me because it includes trans identities, which is really, really important. Trans identities, alternative versions of sex, contraceptives, what happens after. It just is more comprehensive than abstinence education. So I don't know, just kind of sitting in the meetings, I kind of started picking up on what was going on with that. And I think that actually brought out more attention. Our Celebration Church protest got some attention from the public, but that was really the one that was pulling out the snakes. So I went to this meeting kind of just unaware that they were talking about this. And I sit down in the audience next to my friend, and one of the two of these women right behind me called me disgusting. And I was just I was really surprised, I was just what is going on? And so I turn around and I try and wave over a cop or something. And the cops didn't do anything. So I was just kind of sitting, one, that meeting was already super heavy because you have just tons of parents in there saying if I teach my daughter that she's a girl, then the school better not teach her anything else. And it's just like, there's no words to their ignorance. There's no words to like even debating that children should be given more education about themselves. Anyway, so yeah, it was just like really harsh language talking about like we're teaching kids sex and how normalizing transgenderism is like dangerous for kids and they're going to start pulling out their kids. It was just horrible. So I was already in like an unsafe space. I was aware, but when they called me disgusting was kind of the tipping point. And then after like being ignored by the cops, that's when I was like, you know, like I had felt these feelings way too often or way too many times. Like they were just reminded me of like all of my grade school, like being called queer, being behind my back, having things thrown at me, like being like what is it? Not outed. Treated like an othered, yeah, being othered, and like, and all those feelings. I kind of left high school feeling very alienated and without community and by myself. Like I had to find my own way, like, and I don't know. It just was like a huge like flashback because you're just sitting there and having no one understand your issues. Like everyone was just surprised. Everyone was just like, okay. And so after like kind of boiling over with like trauma and like just being harassed, I started screaming like that trans lives matter because it seemed like none of them understood what they're saying is what's making it okay to kill us in some people's minds. And so I start screaming trans lives matter and how their ideas are literally killing us. I started listing off how many have died. I was screaming their ages. I was screaming their names. The room was silent. It was really cool. But no, like, I mean, I honestly remembering it was kind of really fast how it happened. But like on my way out, I started screaming at another lady who had just finished speaking all kinds of tongues. And I told her, I was like, we're not here to touch your children. We just want equality. Like we just want equality and acceptance. Like it was ridiculous. And so anyways, then the cops started escorting me out and then they're chasing me out of the building and I'm leaving and they kept telling me to stop and I'm like, I'm not gonna stop. Like I already know, like I'm gonna just leave. Like I'm not here to like, I know my limits and I know that I've messed up, so I'm gonna leave. And so I ended up walking off the property and the cops keep trying to tell me to stop and then they try and grab me. And then luckily there was a bunch of white allies around telling them to let go of me and the cops did. So like, I like to say, God bless some white allies. They really came in handy there.
Yeah. To me, I mean, at kind of the very core of this, you know, the whole, what became this incident to me at the very core of this is essentially like, what is it that becomes acceptable speech and what is it that becomes, kind of harassment? Because I feel like, you know, what essentially, both the, AISD school board and, to a much larger extent, AISD police in sort of their actions, what they responded to, what they didn't respond to, how they responded to this person versus, that person. What they really were enforcing was this idea that like what is respectable and okay is to say violent and hateful things that have a serious like material impact on you know, trans people, as long as you say that in a quote unquote respectable way, as long as you say that quietly, as long as you whisper that to somebody, as long as you're not too loud about it and whatnot. And that somehow is the acceptable form of discourse. Whereas someone, like when you were, I mean, essentially, I would consider that almost kind of a verbal assault. What, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I definitely felt like violated. I felt attacked. I felt like all of my safety was just taken away and no one was paying attention until after I had spoken up.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it too, is like, you know, if you don't speak up, then it becomes simply a silent issue. They get kind of their way. So it becomes a lose-lose, where if you say anything, then you become the target of, kind of this, police, you become the target of the police. You become the target of, these groups. If you don't say anything, then they absolutely get their way, and they know that, and they game the system. And it seems to me that that's just absolutely their entire kind of design. Mm-hmm. I know that, as Austin ISD Police Department was quote unquote investigating this, that they were very worried that what you had done might have been quote unquote premeditated. Whereas all of these people, all of these bigots showing up, mostly I imagine from pretty far out of town, because I don't know these kind of people within. I mean, I know some people within Austin, they're that bigoted for sure. I'm not going to say there's now a hell of a lot of bigotry in Austin, but like, you know, you can tell the bigots in Austin versus the bigots outside of Austin, and these are the kind of people from like the surrounding suburbs and the surrounding like West Austin.
Most of them didn't even have kids in the school system. Like it was like a bunch of old, angry, like white grandmas and angry old dads. All of them were white. Like, I mean, there was maybe one Hispanic guy and like one black woman, but like the majority, like 99% of them were white and old and angry.
Yeah, for sure. White, old, angry, rich, and you know, this kind of thing is for sure premeditated. Like this kind of essentially assault on the autonomy even of Austin school district to decide its own kind of sex ed policies when they themselves don't even have a stake in it. I think just to me says everything about what their intentions were. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, like this also kind of factored into, one of our, previous episodes with Ken Zarefis, where when we're talking about the kind of police response to this, Austin School District Police then went, Ken Zarefis being the president of the, Education Austin, the teachers union here in Austin. So, Ken Zarefis, essentially as sort of a record to, like, from my understanding, to essentially make sure that anything that happened to you was, on camera, as sort of like a preventative measure, took about 20 seconds of cell phone video. The Austin Police Department went after him, insisted that they had a right. First of all, like they started off making it about this 20-second video, and then claimed they had an entire right to his phone, his entire phone that they intended to seize. First, without a warrant, they said they could do it without a warrant. Then they went and got the warrant. They told him, "You're making this more like you're making this difficult on us," as though like the Fourth Amendment is something that's supposed to be difficult, like for cops to understand.
Oh my God, I didn't know people use their rights. I didn't know people had rights. That's really what they were surprised by.
Yeah, you're standing between us and the thing we've already decided that we want to do. This is difficult that we have to go.
So terrible. It was so bad.
And so, yeah, that created this huge snafu that got a lot of different civil rights organizations involved. And it's just like the fallout from this, I think, I feel like it should have been larger than it was. I feel like this should still be on the news. The fact that you were essentially assaulted by these people, verbally assaulted, the fact that they kind of premeditated, coming down to like these school district meetings and trying to shut down the conversation with regard to the school board. And the fact that, the Austin ISD cops, police departments, we know, started essentially like one of the two routes of police departments started as union busters, use this as a pretense to first of all try and pin this on you as though you premeditated it, but then also to use this as a pretense to get into a union organizer's phone and get all of this stuff that could possibly be on that. It just, I don't know. There's so much kind of blatant injustice.
I thought it was funny too, because I ended up looking at the woman who was pressing charges against me. And if you Google her name, I don't remember what it is, but literally it pops up as like an anti-LGBT activist. And I was like, she was really looking for her moment in the sun to put a trans person in jail for no reason. And I was just like, wow, like, I don't know. I was just really surprised, but also not like, I think I was when it happened, I was not surprised about like what had happened. Like, I mean, bigots are going to call me disgusting, whatever. Like, that's what happens. What I was really surprised by was kind of like the reaction of the community, like the support that I received. And like the allies who stood in between me and the cops while I was chanting, like those are all like extremely new experiences to me as like a trans Black person. Like in school, like I said earlier, is like you're just by yourself. You feel like you have to build your own armor. And so it was just really, that was kind of the best part of the experience for me. Like, although it was horrible, but it was nice knowing that people were finally starting to pay attention to how cops react to people of color, how cops react to, how cops are reactionary. They're not like, that was, it was just nice that other people were finally saying it instead of just me. So.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. Like, especially in a town like Austin, its quote unquote progressive reputation is usually just, it causes so much kind of problems because so many kind of well-intended kind of white liberal types just think that they don't have anything to worry about. Of course, we have a progressive police department, right? I mean, but no, it's
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I mean, Austin per capita is the most deadly police department in the state of Texas, and one of the deadliest, again, per capita in the country. Austin Police Department had the nationwide scandal a while back that continues to be ongoing, essentially the nationwide scandal around thousands of untested rape kits that then turned into well over 1,400 quote-unquote exceptionally cleared rape cases where they essentially found the person who did it and then did not charge the person for a reason that they mostly left unspecified. So they're not, that managed to get picked up by like national news, became a national scandal. Austin Police Department still really has not changed much of their MO since that. And the Travis County the district attorney, Margaret Moore, who was behind so much of this as well, behind so much of the lack of prosecution, and who even said that if a woman has been drinking, that that she doesn't have a case to even claim a sexual assault or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact quote. Well, she for a while was sitting on the head of the sexual assault review team that was supposed to be reviewing these practices. She was not on the head, but part of that team before she was forced out. So like, that's just a rundown of like, to me, what Austin Police Department are all about.
Yeah. You know why they're called pigs?
Why is that?
Because they're lazy.
And they wallow in all the muck of society and whatnot, for
exactly.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess if you're just tuning in, you're listening to People's Republic with Brianna Griffith. People's Republic originates on KOOP 91.7 FM Austin. We are also broadcast on WHIV 102.3 FM New Orleans, and we are available as a podcast wherever podcasts are podded. We are talking today with Naomi Wilson, who's an LGBTQ activist with several different groups, including Transgender Education Network of Texas, Austin DSA, as well as the Antifa Church. As we move forward here, what kind of is the situation with regard to like the school board? Have they really made the decisions? Have they made any sort of decisions on what sort of like sex ed curriculum they're going to be pursuing? Have they bowed to this kind of pressure? Where do we stand with that? And then, kind of what can people do kind of to sort of get involved in this if they're interested?
Yes. Okay. So after the meeting, I think like one of the scariest things is when you're sitting in those rooms and hearing those arguments over and over again. And like, since our society is kind of like, you hear these kind of like homophobic arguments echo throughout the entire world, you feel like they're winning. You feel like the school board is like reacting to them, is paying attention to them, is caring for their needs and their concerns. But after the school board meeting where the fiasco has happened, I actually got a lot of support from the school board. While I was outside crying, like Dr. Cruz came out and met me. His like attendant or assistant came out and met me, and like they both gave me hugs, and a bunch of people from the parents came out, and like they all just were like giving me hugs and making sure I was okay. And so that was really surprising. And then a couple weeks later, I had a personal meeting with Aarti Singh, the district something. I don't know what she is. But I had a personal meeting with her about my experiences and what happened at the meeting. And she didn't know that someone had called me disgusting. Like that was still kind of like under the radar. It's more known now, but back then it wasn't. And then I didn't go to the following school board meeting because I was not feeling safe because the cops were threatening me with warrants and crap. So I sat out, but what happened is a lot of community members and parents had printed pictures of me and brought them to the school board meeting, and we were talking about what had happened and how like they need to be more proactive about preventing situations like that, and how they're standing in solidarity with my experience and how I felt that day. And but anyways, the school board also, I meant to say, the school board also had pride flags, like, because like with my meeting with Aarti, I think is it, sorry. Aarti, I told her like she wanted to ask me how do I show support from the board, but because like we can't shut them down, we can't tell them no, like that's taking away their First Amendment or whatever. And I told her like, because I did this class at UT where I helped a professor teach about how to make their their office a safe space. And one of the biggest things is signaling, like just having a pride flag, having stickers, having books, wearing clothes, having buttons, having something. And so when she heard that, she was like really, really excited. And I was like, yeah, you could wear like trans colors on the day of the vote or whatever. And so she was just like, we were kind of having a good time about that. But the next board meeting, there was pride flags up while these parents were giving their little homophobic speeches, and they're just sitting there looking so cheery. There's pictures of them just looking so cheery as they have this little pride flag. It's a pride and a trans pride. Like, I'm surprised, with cis people, they're just like gonna have the pride flag and think that covers all whatever. But they also had a trans one, which was really important to me because it made me feel seen, and it made me feel like what I said was heard. And so having that be recognized was really awesome. And she also validated me in knowing that like they all unanimously voted to update the sex ed curriculum, and they've already voted to implement it. What they're working on now is making sure that they are upholding their original values of what they wanted that curriculum to be. And so curriculum to be but yeah, so that's what they're voting on. And what I'm doing, they're officially like kind of like sealing the deal on October 28th. And so what I'm doing is I'm hosting a little I'm bringing pride to them. So like they had a pride of their own a couple weeks ago at the PAC, exactly where Celebration Church was held. So I kind of felt like that was a big slap in the face for them. Like that was kind of cool, like a good little cleaning the energy or whatever. But on October 28th, they're having a meeting to finally kind of wrap it up, sort of. And so what I'm doing is I'm asking the community to come out and have a good time. I've got drag queens coming. We're going to have loud music. Someone's going to buy pizza. And we're just going to have a really big gay time to support the school board. Like, even if it's not perfect, the fact that they're trying, like, I think getting it in as soon as possible and then updating it to be better is a better way of going about it than just waiting for it to come through.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think of, just having been in schools and remembering kind of my time in schools and just realizing how little generally has changed and how much needs to be changed. And it just like seems like any, the steps forward, especially at this point, like show a willingness to like continue something that looks like progress in the face of, what we're looking at, like what the kind of national conversation is, which is very much like sort of this split between like this counter-revolutionary force is attempting to roll back all the gains of the 60s and whatnot. And, the kind of insurgent, broadly speaking, like the insurgent left, which is really trying to like actually push the conversation forward. Like the neoliberal center, it to some degree is collapsing. And so like, there's more of a clear kind of side to be on, whether or not any group or any kind of initiative is perfect. It comes down to like, to some degree, like what side of that are you going to fall on, like sort of the kind of insurgent left, or are you going to just go like completely counter-revolutionary, or are you going to try and pretend like things can like this status quo is going to hold, which it's not.
Definitely. I don't like to like identify things with like left or right. I just like to think of it as humane and like inhumane, because a lot of their arguments were kind of echoed from like the 50s where segregation was a thing. So like you can just kind of hear the same things, and it's like if you are siding them with them on being anti-LGBT, then like if we keep rolling back, you're probably going to be anti-black at the same time.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of like it's just scary to have these people like using the same exact arguments, like, oh, they're scary, they're violent, they're sexual, they're gonna rape our kids. Like it's ridiculous. I do want to make sure that like the community, anyone listening that is in support of what I'm doing, what I've been fighting for, me and my friends or the school board has been working hard on. The best way to get involved is to write emails, show up to my party, which will be really, really fun. I swear to God, like it's going to be so great. Drag queens, glitter, music, pizza, like what could you want more? It'll be the best school board meeting to ever attend. that, and then also sign up to speak. And like I have an event page on Facebook called We Are Family, and the reason why I named it that is because the last meeting, the concerned parents of crap they were gathered and having like a little press conference where they were all wearing family t-shirts. And so I was just like, ugh. So like, I don't know. I'm just going to make it really gay with like the song We Are Family. Like that's going to be my theme because we are family. Like, I mean, we get to choose our families and like people who care for us and like our blood family. Anyone that is nice to you is your family. And yeah, just show up. Like literally, I want to try and drown these people out.
Yeah. So just one more time for the info for that. I am pulling it up now. Yeah. You can find this on Facebook. It's October 28th. The name of the event is We Are Family Love Gathering at AISD Board Meeting. It's put on by Rainbow Muller and Austin DSA. Yeah, it's October 28th. That's a Monday from 6 p.m. To more or less 9 p.m. It'll go whenever. Yeah. So all the information is up there on Facebook. Yeah. That should be really interesting, and I hope it goes well. We have looks like a few more minutes for sure. Anything else you feel that like has generally been missing from this conversation around both the kind of sex ed part of it, or the you know, especially with like regard to AISD again, like what did they do with the $30-some thousand that they but yeah, anything else if you want to bring that up, great. If not, we can talk about like whatever's kind of on your mind that you feel needs to be kind of added to this conversation.
Yeah. What I think also is like just about the sex ed curriculum, a lot of the things that the parents are pissed off about is like consent-based education or consent education. Because I feel like if people were taught the value of consent in all aspects of their life, I think we would definitely have a better society than we have now. I think another experience that was funny was when I was crying outside of the school board. One of the Dr. Cruz or someone kept asking me to come back into the meeting, like, you're welcome. And so I told them, I was like, please, this is what a consent-based education does. I know the limits of my body. Please, I do not want to be in there. So please respect that. And everyone was laughing right outside of right when I said that. Like I'm in tears. Like even when I'm in tears, I can make a joke. But it was really funny because everyone was like, "Oh," and it was just I don't know. That's just I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, no, for real. I think that's real important. I think that's a great place to end it on. And yeah, of course, we'll keep covering this story as it comes up. We've been joined for this segment by Naomi Wilson, who's a LGBT activist with different organizations, including a Transgender Education Network of Texas, that's TENT, the Austin Democratic Socialists of America, Austin DSA, as well as the Antifa Church, talking about a kind of variety of different events, including the AISD school board meetings and the kind of the struggle for sex ed curriculum there. Once again, Naomi is holding an event along with Rainbow Muller and Austin DSA. That's on October 28th from 6 to 9 p.m. It's called We Are Family Love Gathering at AISD Board Meeting. You can find the info on Facebook if you're interested. Thank you very much, Naomi, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are listening to People's Republic with Brianna Griffith. People's Republic originates on KOOP 91.7 FM Austin and is also broadcast on WHIV 102.3 FM New Orleans. We are available as a podcast on Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, I think Google Podcast, or wherever else podcasts are potted. Stay tuned for our next segment in just a minute. For our next segment, I'd like to get into a little bit of the geopolitics that have been in the news so heavily and sort of deconstruct a little bit of the mythology around them. We're going to start off talking about Ukraine for a bit, and then we're going to talk about some of the latest developments with regard to the Kurdish Syrian alliance in Syria. That is the alliance between the Kurdish forces in northern Syria and the Syrian Arab Army, and see how that has kind of developed. To talk about both of these, we are joined by Walter Smolarek, who is a Sputnik News analyst, as well as the producer of Loud and Clear. Thank you very much, Walter, for coming back on the show.
Very happy to be here.
So, the thing that's kept Ukraine in the news has obviously been originally Trump's kind of investigation into it appears to be into two things, really, which is he was, quote unquote, investigating the investigators with regard to some of the, now debunked Russiagate conspiracy theory or hoax to determine essentially how that came to be. And then also was looking into the appointment essentially of Hunter Biden as the head of Ukraine's, I believe, largest energy company after the U.S. coup in 2014. So I'm wondering if you can kind of, basically just deconstruct what this entire story has been all about, because there have been so many just really just kind of bad reporting on this from U.S. media. I know you've had a pretty good perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks. Well, the Democrats have been really thinking about it. They've been trying super hard, and they finally figured out a way to lose to Donald Trump in the 2020 election. And that's with this impeachment probe. I mean, so there's sort of two issues at play here, right? There's like what exactly happened in Ukraine, both, what the Trump administration officials or, friends like Rudy Giuliani were doing. And then there's, why did the Democrats decide to open up an impeachment probe on this as opposed to, any of the other criminally horrible things that the Trump administration has done. So to start with the first piece, I guess, what's actually going on, I think, you're correct in your introduction that basically this is like round two of the Russiagate probe. So, in 2016, elements of the FBI and other intelligence agencies opened up, a counterintelligence investigation, sort of set up a scenario in which a counterintelligence investigation could be opened up against the Trump presidential campaign. So, the reason why the elites in the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon and other sort of elite ruling class circles opposes Donald Trump is completely distinct than the reasons that, you or I or millions of other people oppose Donald Trump, right? For his extreme racism, for his anti-worker policies, for his, bellicose warmongering. That's not why. They view Donald Trump as a completely incompetent, probably with reason, a completely incompetent manager of their system. He's an unacceptable choice. And so they wanted, in the words of Peter Strzok, one of the FBI agents working on this case, to have an insurance policy against the possibility that Donald Trump would be elected president. And that's sort of exactly how this has functioned. So he did end up winning the presidency despite losing the popular vote. And so then, the sort of mechanism went into place. There was this big scandal that immediately engulfed the Trump administration around alleged and, non-existent Russian interference into the 2016 presidential campaign or, collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government to win the election. So the Trump administration, having sort of defeated the Mueller probe, right, the report found that there was no collusion and then, didn't make a determination with regards to obstruction of justice. But, just imagine if that was the basis, right? Obstruction of justice, meaning, the Trump administration wouldn't let the investigators find out that there was no collusion. I mean, it would be a very bizarre presentation to the public. And so the Trump administration basically launched a counteroffensive led by Attorney General Barr, Pompeo was involved, Rudy Giuliani was involved, to sort of uncover the true origins of this. And part of that is, it was an international effort, right? And so, there's international dimensions to this. And Ukraine is one of the places where this counteroffensive was going on, basically, trying to dig up information about the origins of the Russia probe, the Russiagate probe, the counterintelligence investigation. And sort of on the side, they were doing other things, right? So it appears that Rudy Giuliani was trying to, get information about Hunter Biden, his appointment to the board of directors of this, major Ukrainian gas corporation where he was paid $50,000 a month. Now, Hunter Biden is not a Ukraine expert. He's not an energy expert. In fact, when he was appointed to the board of directors, he had, kind of just gotten kicked out of the Navy reserves for doing cocaine. This guy is, he's kind of like a classic screw up rich kid, right? Who, just sort of floats through life and does very, very well because his dad is so rich and powerful.
He's sort of the McCain of the Democratic Party. So like in certain ways, I think.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's right. So the Democrats decided to launch an impeachment proceeding because Trump was, pretty clearly pressuring the Ukrainian President Zelensky to, help him in this investigation, primarily when you look at the transcript, primarily about the origins of the Russiagate investigation, but also as kind of a side project, this Hunter Biden Burisma gas corporation thing. So they chose to launch an impeachment proceeding on this, which nobody in the United States cares about this. I mean, there's I shouldn't say nobody, but, the people who determine the outcome of the election, right? People who are deciding either between Trump or the Democrat or, more realistically, like the Democrat or just staying home. Like, this convoluted story about Ukraine and the, Zelensky and a phone call, like that's not going to be moving to anybody. In fact, it just sort of makes the entire campaign about the personality of Donald Trump, which is a winning formula for Donald Trump. Trump is happy about that. And the added stupidity of it is that the whole story implicates the Democratic Party frontrunner in this, what would come off to most people, I think, is a pretty clear example of corruption and nepotism.
If you kind of mention the obvious fact that there's a clear case to be made of corruption with regard to Hunter Biden, the fact that the Obama administration had overthrown the government of Viktor Yanukovych, which we're always told is a quote unquote pro-Russian government, and therefore, anything that the U.S. does to overthrow him is somehow justified because he was quote unquote pro-Russian, even though he was not pro-Russian. He really was committing the ultimate sin, which was trying to remain neutral between Western powers and Russia at a point where that drift was where it was drifting further. But anyway, the U.S. Contextualizing this within 2014, the U.S. had just overthrown the government of Yanukovych, and it's essentially brought back neo-Nazis to power in Ukraine. And when I say neo-Nazis, I'm not being hyperbolic. I mean that a large percentage of the, for instance, Azov battalion, which is now an official part of the Ukrainian National Guard, has, for instance, all sorts of Nazi and SS imagery, and has carried out essentially attacks such as pogrom-style attacks against Jewish, Roma, and Russian-speaking communities in much of, from what I understand, in much of eastern Ukraine. So that was what the U.S. did essentially to Ukraine, was install this far right-wing coup, the same way they did in Honduras, the same way they did in Haiti, the same way they've done. That was all during the Obama administration. So then, of course, as you're talking about Hunter Biden, who knows nothing about Ukraine, who knew nothing about energy, who has no background in energy whatsoever, suddenly became wound up on the board of the Ukraine's largest energy company, and NPR and other, again, corporate news outlets have suggested that if you mention that, it's a conspiracy theory. Well, I don't think there's any real conspiracy theory there. It seems a pretty obvious case of, at very least, nepotism. And I think the larger, going back to the larger question here of first of all, like what the Democrats consider and what just generally both the Republicans and Democrats consider to be acceptable foreign policy with regard to just overthrowing governments at their whim and installing, interests that are friendly to their interest. But then the other kind of question of their alignment to this so-called national security state, the surveillance state, when it seems like the real big issues of election interference to me is really with the FBI's interference. And again, of course, I just want to make clear, I don't feel like I need to, but I mean, I find Trump and I find his whole lot to be despicable. I also find the FBI to be despicable. And between the two, the FBI is the one that's a lot less accountable because Trump will be out of office max 6 years from now at this point. Whereas the FBI will continue essentially unelected, unaccountable to any sort of the public. And the FBI has kind of the far more horrific record. Obviously, they serve kind of different mechanisms within the same state. But you look at the FBI, the COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, which assassinated and infiltrated different leftist groups and essentially left all kind of 60s social movements in shambles. Then moved to, for instance, assaulting and infiltrating and doing the same thing to environmentalist groups in the 1990s. Then you look at what happened in the 2000s with the FBI. Then FBI Director Robert Mueller got up and essentially testified before Congress that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. So there was his first, what you could, I think, make a good case is a lie before Congress about an issue of national security. So why the Democratic members of Congress would trust Mueller today on that same issue is beyond me. But the fact that, Mueller not only did that while also rounding up thousands of innocent Muslims after September 11th. I mean, this is the FBI's kind of history up until the present. And the fact that the FBI meddled in the 2016 election is much, much more disturbing to me than, again, the still completely unsubstantiated, at this point, the real conspiracy theory, which is the Russiagate conspiracy theory that remains unsubstantiated. I'm far more concerned about the possibility of the FBI and what the implications for that is, especially moving into this new period of the Democrats and some Republicans' sudden concern for quote unquote whistleblowers. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that with regard to what, how you feel about the so-called whistleblower scenario, and anything else regarding Ukraine.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so that's another important piece of the story here, because, the presentation in most of the media of what happened, or sort of how this Ukraine controversy came to light, is that there was a heroic whistleblower who, out of, a sense of duty, of patriotism, loyalty to the Constitution, felt that they just had to step forward and, bring this phone call between Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky to the attention of the intelligence community. This is what they call it, the intelligence community inspector general. That, I believe, is nonsense. One thing we know for sure about the supposed whistleblower is that they are, a pretty high-ranking intelligence officer, an intelligence officer, presumably pretty high-ranking. They also had no direct knowledge of the call, right? So they weren't on the call themselves. So that leads us to believe, well, okay, so how do you know about this? I mean, how do you have enough information to fill out this highly, highly consequential, whistleblower report to the Inspector General? And if you read the report, the whistleblower report, the intelligence agent, the quote unquote whistleblower, says, well, I heard about it from many of my colleagues. Many people told me about this. And also the style of the complaint is not written in the style of, a standard CIA, analyst writing. Something that John Kiriakou, who works on Loud and Clear, mentioned is that, there's a specific CIA writing style that's just kind of like drilled into your head. And this was not it, right? The style of writing was actually highly legalistic. This was a report that it appears to me, it appears to a lot of other people too, to be pretty clearly written by like lawyers, like maybe by a team of lawyers. So this was clearly an organized thing. And when you put that into the context of what we were talking about earlier, in terms of like how the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign fell flat, and how the origins of that counterintelligence campaign are now being, there are aggressive steps being taken by the Trump team to reveal the extent of that effort, I think it makes a lot of sense to make the case to believe that this was basically, a counter offensive, right? That Barr and the others were sort of getting pretty close to exposing the whole thing, right? The whole extent of the FBI's effort to create an insurance policy should Donald Trump win the election. And basically be able to trump the vote. Now, that's not to say that the vote itself was anything particularly democratic. I don't think that elections in the United States reflect the will of the people in the United States. But it is extremely troubling, that one of the most notorious repressive agencies in the world, the FBI, is sort of directly inserting themselves into any type of electoral process, no matter how flawed. So that, I think, is basically what happened with the whistleblower.
Yeah, I think that's all kind of very important context. And if people are interested in learning a little bit more, there's an article. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I've heard a lot of people kind of discussing it. And I think it reiterates a lot of what it is we're saying here, which is the Matt Taibbi article in Rolling Stone. The quote unquote whistleblower probably isn't, which gets into a lot of For instance, the fact that real kind of whistleblowers, those who actually push up against the mechanisms of state power, have suffered greatly for this. And this definitely does seem to be written by kind of a lawyer committee that seems to have the backing of the very repressive state apparatuses that this person would supposedly be a whistleblower against. So if you're just tuning in, you are listening to People's Republic with Brianna Griffith. People's Republic originates on 91.7 FM Austin. It is also broadcast on WHIV 102.3 FM New Orleans. We are available as a podcast wherever podcasts are podded. We are speaking with Walter Smolarek, who's a news analyst at Sputnik News, as well as the one of the producers of Loud and Clear. So let's now pivot a little bit to Syria, which I think shows kind of a similar, it exposes, I think, a similar sort of rift in the kind of between what Trump is doing and what the sort of the security state really wants, what the kind of the consensus rather of for instance the Pentagon wants to some degree. When Trump talks about pulling troops out of Syria, it's clear that he's not doing that. From my understanding, U.S. troops simply shifted 20 miles or so kind of south as Turkey began to invade northern Syria. But I think there are more serious questions about what any of the U.S. is doing in Syria, to begin with. As of the time we're talking right now, which is October 15th in the afternoon, the Kurdish forces had allied themselves with Damascus, I do believe, to essentially try to fend off an impending Turkish invasion of northern Syria. Can you maybe talk about what the kind of current status of that is?
For sure. Well, it's a very rapidly developing situation. You're definitely right that initially the only U.S. withdrawal that happened was very, very minor and only from the immediate vicinity of the Turkish-backed invasion and not from northeastern Syria in general. Although now it actually appears, it's very, very murky, but some of the latest statements by Pentagon officials indicate that the United States is fully withdrawing from the country. But of course, the Pentagon generals are very upset about this, and they can drag their feet or even openly defy orders, honestly. It wouldn't be the first time that they did that. So the ultimate status of the U.S. occupation, a legal U.S. occupation done in violation of the explicit wishes of the sovereign independent government of Syria, that remains to be seen. Although it actually at this very moment, it seems like they are being withdrawn, although that could very rapidly change, of course, and change back and forth several times. So that's one issue, right? The status of the U.S. occupation in eastern Syria. Another issue, of course, is the Turkish invasion itself. So this isn't the first time that Turkey, and when we say the Turkish invasion, it's sort of Turkish air power and artillery, and some troops certainly as well on the ground, but primarily religious fundamentalist militias, extreme religious fundamentalist militias that are backed and armed and trained by the Turkish government, which itself has a right-wing religious government. So they also invaded first in an operation called Euphrates Shield and took over several important towns in northern Syria that were held by the YPG, which is the main Kurdish militia armed group in Syria. It's the armed wing of the PYD, the Democratic Union Party. They also invaded last year the province of Afrin. And when they invaded Afrin, the atrocities were tremendous. Under the YPG, there were basically like progressive principles prevailed in the areas under their administration. In some areas, there are, lots of cooperatives, things that would sort of resemble a decentralized socialist type of administration. And other areas, that's not quite the case. But in general, this means the replacement of a generally progressive administration with just, the most brutal theocratic gangs. And so, of course, this invasion that's going on right now, people are extremely concerned, terrified, mortified that those atrocities are going to happen again. And in fact, what we've been able to sort of preliminarily gather from afar, at least like here, those of us in the United States, it's clear that those things are happening again. So it's a terrible thing. But what the conservative and liberal ruling class circles alike, what the corporate media is saying, what congressmen in both the Democratic and Republican parties are saying, is basically that is an effort to cynically manipulate the Turkish invasion into an excuse for the United States to prolong its military intervention, its military occupation of the country indefinitely. So what's actually happened, though, is something that I think is very positive for the future of Syria, and that's a united front has been formed between the YPG, the Kurdish militia, and the Syrian government. The Syrian government has liberated most of the countries west of the Euphrates River, most of western Syria, but most of eastern Syria is controlled by the YPG. And what could happen, what possibly could have happened is another stage in the civil war, which would be so devastating and traumatizing to sort of like the national fabric of Syrian society, where the government, tries to then go on and reclaim the eastern part of the country. But instead, what appears to be happening is on the basis of a military alliance to repel this invasion of northern Syria, is an outline of a political deal is being formed as well that could reunify the country, prevent serious fragmentation into 2 or 3 or more parts, and basically, and bring the war to an end. But for that to happen, of course, the Turkish invasion of Syria will have to be repelled, and that's what's going on right now. There are certain key towns. Manbij is sort of the one to look at, as we're recording this, where Syrian government troops, which have now moved into the area on the basis of this new alliance with the YPG, could actually come into direct conflict with the Turkish military. There could be, a state versus state war that breaks out, rather than just a proxy war, which it has been up until this point, which would be yet another stage of escalation in this long and very devastating war.
Yeah, there was a rather fascinating little clip of a video that I saw earlier today showing the actual U.S. Supposedly showing the U.S. troops as essentially heading south down a road as the Syrian Arab Army was driving that same way, both very much in a hurry driving north. Or that's what the video appeared to show, and I think that's very that's very kind of telling, I think, of the situation where, first of all, the fact that the U.S. troops continue to at least at this point illegally occupy part of Syria as they drive away, as they're somehow because obviously like they can't really be fired upon. Like Syria would bring itself into a huge escalation by firing upon these illegal occupiers of their own land, and so yet they have to drive north to repel this Turkish assault from a U.S. ally. Just really speaks volumes to the damage that the U.S. has done. And I think the way this narrative has shifted over the course of the Syrian civil war really is kind of disturbing, because first, essentially we saw the whole kind of heroic moderate rebels that the U.S. essentially was sponsoring in Syria that later turned out to be various kind of branches of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. There was, of course, various reasons why Syrians would want to protest the government for sure, but the U.S. cynically kind of exploited this and essentially armed factions of what they knew to be Al-Qaeda and what would later become ISIS within Syria in one of many attempts to kind of balkanize the country. As that became more exposed, as it became more exposed to kind of the general public that was what was going on, then all of a sudden there was this kind of new cynical balkanization project, which was, I think, what many American leftists would call Rojava, or the Kurdish areas of northern Syria, where the Kurds then became these sort of these folk heroes among American leftists, where they could essentially do no wrong, without the kind of broader geopolitical understanding that, like, the U.S. has often, the U.S. kind of parts of the U.S. and Israel have often talked about, for instance, forming a Kurdistan that would essentially branch through what they consider to be like 3 historical enemies, which would be Syria, Iraq, parts of Syria, Iraq, and Iran. So the plan there was obviously to balkanize the state and prevent it from being a kind of regional power that could stand up to the U.S. And obviously, course, obviously, northern Syria also has very large oil resources. A lot of the oil resources are concentrated in that area. So that was the kind of additional incentive, in addition to eliminating the sort of regional power. Of course, the American kind of attitude, especially when you have when you have the entirety of U.S. Congress, essentially the most despicable people on earth, as far as I'm concerned, all standing up and saying they support the Kurds, something is not being told about the story. That's not to say that the Kurdish national liberation struggle isn't absolutely crucial, I think, but just that they're essentially, I would say again, like cynically using this as an excuse to stay in Syria forever, and to, in many ways, deny the Kurds the sort of autonomy that they would be likely to get if they were able to kind of freely work with the other powers in the region, I think.
Sure. Well, the Kurdish people have been denied a state since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, right? Sort of the birth of the modern Middle East as we know it, which is a result of the Sykes-Picot Treaty. So the Sykes-Picot Agreement was basically between, on the one side, the British Empire, so that's Sykes, and on the other hand, the French Empire, that's Picot, about how they would divide up the spoils of World War I, the colonies of their defeated rival, which was the Ottoman Empire, the core of which is modern day Turkey. And so, the Kurdish struggle for independence, for national liberation, is sort of a long running one. But of course, the Kurdish independence struggle does not, or the Kurdish liberation struggle, because nowadays, the YPG and forces, in the ideological orbit of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is the main Kurdish organization, underground Kurdish organization in Turkey, don't actually support an independent nation state. But the Kurdish freedom struggle, if you want to call it that, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in, with all the complications of modern geopolitics and the interests of various imperialist powers in the region, primarily U.S. imperialism. And so, there have been, there's sort of a vigorous debate, right, both in Syria and among leftists, all around the world, about the alliance formed between the YPG and U.S. imperialism over the course of the war against ISIS. But what we see now is that alliance clearly, the United States didn't enter it in good faith. I mean, the United States doesn't care about, the United States doesn't care about, the plight of oppressed minorities, of oppressed peoples. And as soon as, in this case, Donald Trump seems to have not even thought about it very much at all. But, I think for electoral reasons, he thinks like, okay, look, we're going to end the endless wars, which is a popular thing for sure. He basically jettisoned the YPG. And so the alliance that's now formed between the Syrian government and the Kurdish forces, I think, has the potential to reunify Syria, right, to prevent that balkanization that you were talking about, which certainly was the goal of the United States. I mean, they kind of gave up on overthrowing the government in Damascus, not because they wanted to, just because they knew they weren't able to. And so they were instead going for the partition of the country. This alliance between the YPG and the Syrian government basically forecloses that possibility. And I think, a likely outcome will be that Syria gets a new constitution that includes, protection for the rights of Kurds, and also preserves the independence, the territorial integrity, the sovereignty of Syria.
Yeah, I think that would certainly be, I think, the best possible outcome given the kind of weight that the U.S. has thrown into destroying the region. It definitely seems like there are more positive outcomes on the horizon, and we can all hope for that for sure. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. We were joined by Walter Smolarek, who's an analyst at Sputnik News, as well as one of the producers of Loud and Clear. Thank you very much, Walter, for coming back on the show.
Glad to have been.
That's all we have for this week. You have been listening to People's Republic with Brianna Griffith. People's Republic originates in Austin, Texas, and is also available as a podcast on Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are podded. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at People's Radio ATX for more news and analysis. We are out of here.